So good morning.
Good morning.
Warriors and prophets and mystics and lovers. Oh my. I'm going to begin a little different than I did this morning because I realized both times now that I forgot to put in my own joys and sorrows in the box for the chaplaincy team. So I'll take this moment if you'll indulge me. I want to share some joys with you. When there's a 5-Sunday month, I actually get a Sunday off. I love that. And as it gets towards the end of the month, some of my evening obligations go. So last Sunday, Father's Day, my wife and I got to sneak out and see the movie Chef, which I shared with the lunch bunch on Wednesday. Great film. If it gets here, go see it if you possibly can. Thursday night, I got to see my old friends at Shakespeare in the Park, which is now Shakespeare at TCU, Trinity Shakes, do the Comedy of Errors. I don't know if you have to steal, borrow, beg, crash the party, stand in the back. You must go see this production. It's directed by Fort Worth's own Joel Farrell. It is brilliantly funny, well crafted, and as much fun as you should be allowed to have for $20 to $25. It's just out of this world. Go see it. And it was so much fun that I decided I'd go see The Tempest, even though I've always tried to avoid that play, because when I went to an all-boys school in their acting department, I did 2 full-length Shakespearean roles in my 4-year career there. The first was Lady Macbeth. I can't tell you how much fun that was to do it that day in front of 3 Roman Catholic nuns saying, "And pluck my nipple from its toothless gums." It went all the way through the records. Another one, I played Ariel in The Tempest. So my dad really was worried about my sexual impulses at that point. But so I'm going to go back and see The Tempest this coming week because the actors were brilliant. The sets and the costumes that TCU does is magnificent. And so do try to go see them. And then Friday afternoon, before the crazies come out on Friday night, my wife and I made it to go see Jersey Boys. And Clint Eastwood has never made a bad film, I guess. It's just an amazing film. And for those of us of a certain generation, it was our music, and so I highly encourage you to go see them. My sorrow is that there's been a lot of stuff going on in our culture these last few weeks and months. And it's something that I struggle with. So my sorrow is that I wrote a letter to the editor of the Dallas Morning News, and apparently they're not going to publish it. And it's probably my own fault. In the letter, of course, I name, which is something that I don't do from the pulpit. But there's probably a couple phrases in here that got it so that it won't be published. But it goes like this, and it's about reparative therapy. The saddest reality of the new party platform and the governor's comments about our LGBT citizens and conversion therapy isn't just the stupidity of equating homosexuality with the disease of alcoholism. It is that they equate resisting the urge to drink with resisting the urge to be a sexual being created in God's image. They're calling for others to live their lives without love, to live without falling in love, securing a spouse, or creating a family. They're expecting other human beings to live their lives without love. How obviously cruel and heartlessly pathetic. And if you believe in Jesus' commandment to love our neighbors as ourselves, how un-Christ-like. Jesus never spoke about homosexuality, ever. Moses and Paul did, but not Jesus. And now they say that they will leave it to the psychologists to decide, but of course they won't. They've already spoken, as have the American Medical Association, psychiatrists, pediatricians, and counselors. They all condemn reparative therapy as bogus and harmful, and 2 states have outlawed it. This position and this party will continue to be willfully ignorant and hatefully bigoted as long as they think it will win them votes. God help us all. in some ways lies at the very heart of our faith tradition. And I will tell you, it is my opinion, my considered and deeply held opinion, that Unitarian Universalism is the most difficult religion humans have ever come up with. You may think that's what? Don't we get to believe whatever we want, do whatever we think, blah, 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 blah. Now, when you say that you're going to love your neighbor as yourself, or as we say it, respect the inherent worth and dignity of every human being without exception, we raise the standard of what it means to be a human community to a level that is very, very difficult. And it requires us, in order to fulfill that promise, that when we come to church, especially when we go into this community, that we bring our best selves. Always. And that can be tough, because when we seek out a new church, as I have before I found this one, you come because something's not quite right in your life. You're broken in some way, whether you've had a family issue, or you're fighting an addiction, or you're just profoundly lonely. When you come to church, you've got some work to do that first time. You've got to get your bearings. You've got to do that personal healing. You've got to get your spiritual identity back intact. You've got to find your confidence, or as they used to say, get your legs under you, and so that you can then participate in the creation of this very important, very difficult, challenging community. We're here to change things. It's not just about what we think or what we do. We are here to change things. And so I started writing this with the work of Peter Gable in my mind. He wrote a book called Another Way of Seeing, in which he says that although we have lived through social movements, we are motivated by a moral, emotional vision of human good that can help bring into being justice and a participation in, and not simply observers of, our world. He writes that it can only happen when our social justice movements are animated by a deeply held spiritual force. And he acknowledges that the legal arena that we have inherited and that we live by now is a legal arena that is now de-spiritualized. And this is where it gets ugly for me. It's just that we, in the liberal corner of God's Garden of Eden, act as though intelligence alone is enough. And he says that to change the world, we must change our thinking. That ultimately we must bring back the moral urgency of our claims for beloved community. That our claims for the extension of love over law, however bad that law may be, must have a superior strength that comes from a deeply held emotional and a recognizable spiritual core. And today, these are my thoughts, the only recognizable religious legal initiatives are hideous distortions of Christianity here in the United States and the distortion of other religious traditions around the world. In the paper yesterday was a call by clerics of another faith to take up arms. Oh my God. When religion wants to kill, I'm reminded when I hear those things that Martin Luther King Jr. suggested that the arc of justice is long. No, the arc of the world is long, but it bends towards justice. It sure seems to take a long time sometimes, doesn't it? Warriors, prophets, mystics, and lovers. I focus on this because I have told you before, and I've been cautioned that I didn't do a really good job of explaining it all, that I consider myself to be a mystic Christian and an atheist. But atheist in the sense, not in the sense that I know how this turns out, but atheist in the sense that I don't believe the theistic God is somehow going to, bring me a red Mercedes or care about my golf game. It's not, it's just, it's an acknowledgement that there's no force out there that's going to keep the train from coming across the tracks if my car stalls out. I'm going to have to get out of the car and fend for myself. And so that sort of knowing that I don't know is at the heart of why I consider myself to be an atheist. But I'm also a mystic, and there are people in the room who we've had robust conversations about this, and wonderful conversations. And so I'm going to explain mysticism for me in a different way. There is a Christian mystic theologian whom I greatly admire. His name is Matthew Fox. And he talks about that if we're going to do this work, this really difficult work of respecting the inherent worth and dignity of every human being, to be ready to love everybody as ourselves, that there are 4 things that we need to think about incorporating into our life. It is becoming warriors, prophets, mystics, or lovers. And I'm going to start with the mystics. For me, I'm always thinking about Michael Dowd, Reverend Michael Dowd's book, Thank God for Evolution, in which he takes the scientific history of the world as it is presented in the Bible, the Old Testament, in Christian terms, and then the real science in what I would call humanist terms, and he parallels that through the book. But what's profound for me is how he separates it into 2 different kinds of language. There's day language and night language. Day language is the language of science. This is how we're going to survive on this earth as human beings. When the lights come up, when the sun comes up, and the saber-toothed tigers are running around, you need to know how to defend your life. You need to know what you can eat, what you can't, what's going to poison you, what isn't. When the clouds gather in a certain way, you need to know to get your umbrellas. Or if they've got another way, you need to run to the cave. This is science. This is how we get through the day. Is knowledge, factual knowledge about how the world works as we can know it as human beings. But night language is important too. Because after we survive, the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune, when the day is done, we found something to eat, our children are nestled in their beds, and the fire in the camp is dying low, and we sit there in the lotus position trying to imagine, what did I learn today? We look up to the stars, and we try to understand what this is all about. And it's hard for us, because the way we know the universe today is that it may not even just be one universe. How are we in this mortal coil ever going to know what's on the other side of this mystery, this mysticism? And so myth and humility are the things that come to us in that night language that give us the hope and the confidence that when the sun comes up again in the morning, we will risk everything again. Everything, including our lives. Mysticism also means, to be pointed and blunt about it, means to know how to pray, and what to pray to, and what to pray for. I pray every day. And it's not to some God beyond my understanding. And it's not for trinkets or divine intervention. Michael Dowd in his book points out the scientific fact that we as human beings have within us at the moment of birth the DNA of every ancestor it took to create our life. All the way back to the beginning, that DNA is in us. And he proves this by saying we're a part of the animal kingdom, and you can look at the animals around us. And he specifically points out birds. They can be born into a nest they didn't create. Their parents can perish before they become adult birds. And yet when they choose to make it, to create a nest, they can build it spot on without knowing or having seen how it was ever done before. And we are a part of that. We have that. So praying for me is not praying for something otherworldly or magical. It's praying to the unrealized power of my own DNA. That there may be some knowledge in me, some hard-earned experience in my DNA that will come to me in this moment and give me the strength I need to change things on my own. But I also firmly believe that because whatever this is that we are in is one thing, however amazing it might be, but that means we're all connected too. And so when I pray to the unrealized potential of your DNA. When somebody tells me they're going to the hospital, or they got a nephew going into surgery, or they're going into hospice, I don't pray for old age to be taken from them, or for God to come down and mysteriously change stage 4 cancer into nothing. I pray that they will find the comfort of experienced health professionals, that the surgeons will be at their best that day. And I pray that if this is their moment to die, that they will find the confidence to say thank you, love the journey, and let go. Just let go. Myth and mysticism. It feeds me, it gives me hope and the confidence to keep doing this day after day. Prophets. What comes to mind when I say the word prophet? Is it a bald, gray-haired, bearded, a prophet? Or is it some guy in sackcloth and ashes with a sign saying, repent, the end is near?
Preach it.
Well, I will tell you what Matthew Fox describes, and I think it's valid. He says, prophets are not just our canaries in the coal mine, although they are. But let me see if I can get this exactly right, because I love this phrase. That prophets are unafraid of seeing the consequences of what we are doing, where we are headed, and unafraid of the hard choices that we know, that are, I had to write this out long again. Unafraid of the unpleasant truths and the hard choices that ensue. Completely self-differentiated, clear-eyed, to see the world as it is, good, bad, or indifferent, and to sound the alarm. To call us all to action. Wow. Now, Matthew says that we shouldn't have to choose to be warriors or prophets or mystics or lovers, that all of those are available to us. Amen. So, I like the idea of thinking that, yes, even though I do sometimes look at the world through rose-colored glasses, that clarity is available to me if I will practice it and try to be that. At least for my spouse and family, and sometimes hopefully for the church. The third thing that he talks about is being warriors. And he tells a couple of stories about that, and I want to share them with you now. Let me just double check the time. Well, we're running pretty. So I'll make this as fast as I can. It's the story of a young man of Native American heritage that joins or gets drafted for Vietnam. So he goes off to Vietnam and survives the 2.5 years there, and actually comes back to the tribe unscathed. And when he gets back, it's the elders call him into the lead teepee and say, we're just wonderfully grateful that you made it through all that and you've come back. But your time as a soldier, you survived that. But now we'd like to offer you the opportunity to become a warrior. And he said, what do you mean warrior? That's what I've been doing. No, you were a soldier. And it's something that's usually only allowed for 18, 19, 20-year-olds to do, because what you were taught in being a soldier was how to kill or be killed. And that's not what a warrior is. Do you want to learn? Well, okay. How long does it take? We don't know. We've seen it happen in a couple of years. Sometimes it takes 3, 4, 5. Sometimes it never happens. But if you're interested, we're here to help you. And he says, okay, I will take this journey with you. How do we start? And they handed him a flute. And they said, take this flute and learn how to play it on your own. And when you are confident enough to give a concert to the entire tribe, come see us. So it took almost 4 years, but he learned how to play that flute, and when he came back, he gave the concert to the entire tribe. And when he was done, he says, is that it? They said, no. And now they gave him a drum. The point being was, of course, is that you can't be a warrior if you haven't fallen in love with all the ways in which it is important to be human. It's not just about kill or be killed. He tells the story of the Irish and Celtic tradition. They have a saying, never give a weapon to anyone who has not learned to dance. That if you don't understand the joy of being alive, you can't truly defend it. Because sometimes being a warrior means being able to take up arms. But sometimes being a warrior means knowing how not to. But either way, you have to understand the depth and breadth of human experience to be someone who can truly defend us and answer the call of the prophets when the alarm is sounded. It takes wisdom to be a warrior. And it takes joy and love to be a warrior. We could all dance now. He also says, though, that the reason why all of these should be available to us is that what the elders taught the young man was that you have to do the heart work. It's not just about learning how to aim and fire and how far to throw a grenade. It's about truly falling in love with life. And that's where it comes to the idea of being lovers. And that's the charge of our faith, isn't it? That we must learn how to love this life no matter what aspect of it we are experiencing at the moment. Human life is tragic. Human life is ecstatic. Human life is horrific at times. And there is such elation and joy at others that we have to learn to take life as it comes and to learn from every aspect of it. One of my mentors says, love the life you have and everything that's in it as it is, even as you recognize the work that needs to be done to transform it into something better. But you can't afford to despair of this life, ever, because it is what we have. And through Michael Dowd's work and this idea of becoming warrior and prophet and mystic and lover, ultimately what I am finding for myself, although I'm not sure I've got it completely worked out yet, is a trust in the universe. I call it my faith. That somehow when the end comes for me, and it will come, that I would have developed a relationship with the universe that allows me to say thank you and let go without panic or pain or feeling punished. Lovers detached from preconception or ideals and no longer required to love only that which is perfect or only some picture of what we think happiness will be, but that everything that comes at us is a part of our growth and our loving. Mystics embrace hope and know how to teach it and how to pray for it. And warriors, prophets, mystics, and lovers are willing to put their lives on the line and leave nothing on the table. That is my prayer for me, and it is now my prayer for you. Bless me. In a minute, we're going to finish our service with a closing hymn, closing words, extinguishing the chalice, and then our congregational closing. But if you will now please stand in body and for spirit, join Scott and Yuki as they prepare for us to sing. Our closing hymn is number 298, Wake Now My Senses.